tried everything, medications, shock therapy, drugs, holistic medicine, everything. And it was never a fast turnaround, but it was really a combination of things. I started in 2009. I met Gavin Larkin, and he had an idea for Are You OK Day. And when I just heard about it, and realising how central my parents were to my recovery, I just really felt it was spot on. And so that year in 2009, and they identified 5 key elements, or they call them team norms, that these very best teams used. And number 1 was psychological safety. And I'll come back to that in a moment. Number 2, you're not going to be incisive, you're not going to be productive, you're not going to be influential. And so managing our mood, not our time, is a really important element of anyone's success.
Today we are joined by the remarkable Graeme Cowan, a resilience expert, accomplished speaker, and author of 5 books, including the internationally acclaimed Back from the Brink. Graeme's journey is nothing short of inspiring. Having faced a challenging episode of depression that his psychiatrist described as the worst he had ever seen, he emerged with a profound understanding of resilience, mood, and performance. His insights have made him a sought-after speaker globally, with audiences praising his authentic, relevant, and compelling style. Previously holding senior leadership positions with Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer, Graeme is now dedicated to helping individuals and teams thrive through resilience, care, and high performance. Graeme is the co-founder at We Care 365 and was instrumental in helping to create Are You OK? Are You OK Day is an Australian national day dedicated to inspiring and empowering people to meaningfully connect with others, asking a simple yet powerful question: are you okay? To promote mental health and well-being. Join us as we explore his extraordinary story and the wisdom he brings to the world. Graeme, welcome to the show. It's fantastic to have you on.
Lovely to join you, Paul.
Your journey from a challenging period of depression to becoming a renowned resilience expert is really inspiring for many people. Can you take us through some of the key moments or experiences during that time, and how did you navigate through the lows? And were there specific events that gradually shaped your path to recovery?
Yeah, sure. I was working as a vice president for a management consulting company, Carney, back in 2000. And we had a very good business. I was involved in leading the recruitment business, or the executive search business that we had there. And we were doing a lot of work in e-commerce, and lots of people calling in and wanting to hire us. But then I think it was in March 10, 2000, the tech crash hit. And it was a really, very, very dramatic drop in the market. The NASDAQ just collapsed, and our business also, decreased very rapidly. And I'd had episodes of depression before, but I really, felt real stress around this. My voice wasn't working properly. I wasn't sleeping well. And in a very, very short period of time, I lost my job. My marriage broke down and had to go and live with my parents. And I was unable to work for 5 years, and tried everything, medications, shock therapy, drugs, holistic medicine, everything. And it was never a fast turnaround, but it was really a combination of things. I started walking really consistently, 45 minutes a day, that sort of thing. I also tried meditation, and I tried it when I was really depressed, and it didn't work. But as my mood lifted, it became a really central part of my life. And, I now meditate for 15 minutes every day, usually at the start of my day. And then another big moment, I think, was reaching out to family and friends. I'd become really isolated, and that was my choice. I felt ashamed to contact people. And but when I did, and I wasn't really looking forward to talking to them, but when I did, I actually found that I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess the final part, and as I said, it was no straight line rapid recovery, was deciding to write my first book, Back from the Brink.
Yeah.
Because when I was really depressed, I really yearned to have hear stories of people who've been through what I'd been through and come through it and find out what worked best for them.
Yeah.
And so it took me about a year to write the book. And I think it was a key thing because writing the book wasn't just obsessing about me and my mood and how miserable I was. It was really trying to produce something that would help other people. And all up, I interviewed 12 Australians and some quite well-known ones as well. I interviewed a couple of former swimming gold medalists, Petria Thomas and John Conrads, the former Premier of West Australia, Jeff Gallop, the icon of the art world, Margaret Olley, and Australia's best-known poet, who's also passed away, Les Murray. Yeah. And I launched it at the Black Dog Institute, and John Brogden, the former opposition leader, he launched it for me. Yeah. And I think because there were some well-known people involved, when we launched at the Black Dog Institute, there was lots of publicity. SBS News covered the launch, and there were lots of other people there, from TV, radio, newspapers. Yeah. And that led to me eventually, just really realizing that most of the people that contacted me were actually the loved ones of someone going through a really tough time. Yeah. And an epiphany for me was just realizing how much my illness affected those around you. And when you're really depressed, you're very self-focused. Exactly. But that was a real realization. That led me writing my second book, which was Back from the Brink 2, How Best to Help a Loved One Overcome Depression. And then through my books, I eventually in 2009, I met Gavin Larkin, and he had an idea for Are You OK Day. And when I just heard about it, and realizing how central my parents were to my recovery, yep. I just really felt it was spot on. And so that year in 2009, we had no money, we had no real resources, we had no full-time employees, but we just really were on a quest to really do and make the most of it. And it was a huge, very rewarding when the first year was, successful. Yes. But even more so that it just got more and more and more successful. And tragically, Gavin passed away from cancer in 2011. But, it's a real testament to the idea and the fact so many people got behind it that Are You OK Day has become what it has today. And then all that background led to me being invited to speak about mental health and resilience. And first of all, it was very focused on, how to overcome depression. But I then sort of really grasped this concept of a moodometer, 0 to 10. So 7 to 10 is green zone, amber zone, and then red zone at the bottom. And it was my realization, and it's certainly very, very proven, is that the earlier you catch something, if it's a depressive illness or anxiety, the faster you can turn it around. And so increasingly I talked about, how we can build our own resilience. And if we keep in the green zone, we're more optimistic, more resourceful, more energetic. So there's very, very good work and private lessons for that. And in the red zone, it's very expensive, very long to recover. And that's brought me to probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And then in addition to the work I do, I co-founded a new business, a new startup called We Care 365. Yep. And we were making scalable programs that showed managers how to build a mentally healthy and resilient team and prevent issues, but also to intervene early if something happened. And, we've really got considerable momentum in the last sort of year or so. I've had people like all of the Audi supermarket managers, 2,500, go through the course.
Fantastic.
Fujitsu are using our program in 10 countries now. And yeah, it's just short, really engaging course that gives practical tips on how to identify someone who's struggling, how to have the "Are you okay" conversation, but more importantly, how to then guide them to help. And I really thought that was the missing piece.
Yeah.
Beyond Blue, Black Dog have that sort of stuff there, but it's really hard to find. There's so much on there, it's hard to find.
That's true.
And so in our programs, we have very simple programs on how to find a mental health savvy GP, about how to prepare for a mental health conversation with a psychologist or a psychiatrist if you've never done that before. So that's a quick overview of, I guess, the last 15 years.
And it's interesting, in your book, Back from the Brink, you do say, like, if you do a Google search, you get like 50 million on depression, you get like 50 million searches coming up. And then it's like, where do you start? That is
absolutely
a big issue in itself. And there's so many different types of treatments. And I love how you've done a survey of over 4,000 people on what actually helped them, which is really, really interesting. One thing I didn't see in there, I don't know if it was part of it, I'd be interested in that, because for me it's good therapy, pet therapy or like dog therapy, because when I'm not feeling 100%, I just cuddle my dog and pick up straight away.
I don't think I include a lot about that in the survey, but I've heard anecdotally many stories like you described, Paul, many stories. In fact, I wrote a blog article about it once, and somehow, I don't know how, but the RSPCA saw it and shared it. And, I had about 200 contributions just saying how, some people talk about finding a bird that was injured and bringing it home and suddenly focusing your attention on that living being and helping it to recover. Dogs, very often I've got a little black Labrador and very, very pure heart, always, in a wonderful upbeat mood. And they also seem to recognize when you're not feeling great as well. And many people find cats as well. So, I've heard many anecdotal experiences about the benefit of pets, for helping to overcome mental health issues.
Graeme, as someone who has faced and overcome significant personal challenges, what advice do you have for early stage startup founders dealing with the constant uncertainty, stress, and unknown factors in the startup landscape?
It is very, very tough. And, I have experience with my own startup, and it's, there's not much money around, and, there's so many things you're juggling. There's so much uncertainty. And so one of the things that I've learned the hard way is to really focus on the things you can control. And that includes, making sure you get enough exercise, just whether it's walking outside, listening to a podcast, if you swim or ride a bike or whatever, just getting that regular exercise really, really counts. And there's lots of research that shows that exercise is very, very good for any mental health issue. In fact, the Black Dog Institute found that it was, just as effective for moderate depression as antidepressants. It's
even
it's
in
really
your survey, rated quite high as well.
And the other part is being able to relax or unwind. And again, that's a challenge when you've got so many things you're juggling.
Yes.
But I always find it's best to, work in a pulse way. So I put my phone on, a timer for 45 minutes. But I work on one thing, focused on one thing. And when that goes off, I then get up, walk around, do something different, get out, maybe go out and water some plants or call a friend or whatever. So to have that sort of break, it's really not healthy to work in a continual way. We think we're being productive, but we're not. And another thing to keep in mind is that when we are in the green zone on that moodometer, Harvard Business Review research tells us that we're 31% more productive, 37% more influential, and 300% more creative.
Yeah.
And they're all incredibly important qualities for a startup where
Absolutely.
you've got to evolve quickly, there's not just black and white solutions, you've got to look at other creative ways to
Yeah.
address an issue. So I really talk about managing your mood, not your time. So making time to ensure that you have good people around you. And, one of the things that also is important is catching up with people that you get on with, people that can support you,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and introducing rituals, in the week. We have a mutual friend, Bernie Orenstein, and one of the things I do every Sunday is to catch up with him,
Right.
another mate at
Yeah.
Curl. We go for a walk, have breakfast, and we've been doing it now for probably about 10 years. And it's very pleasant. It's a beautiful environment. But over that 10 years, we've all had serious things we've had to discuss, like health issues, financial issues, relationship issues.
Yeah.
And I think the quality you look for in those people that you build those relationships in is that you find it an enjoyable experience. That should be obvious. You do it consistently,
Yeah.
and if possible, once a week, and in person. In person is much better than remotely, and of course that
Absolutely.
was a challenge in COVID.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, that you can be vulnerable with them. Admit that you're not going fantastically, that you do need assistance, and to share those problems. And it's the old thing: a problem shared is a problem halved.
Yeah.
And
And often males, it's much harder for them to open up and share what's going on. Particularly more so in the past, but even so now, a lot of us don't really want to open up. So I think that's something that's really important to learn how to do. And then if you've got those friends that you can open up to, that they understand you, I think it's really, really helpful, because we all have our ups and downs, and you're sharing with each other, and you're listening and helping them, and they're helping you. And I have the same sort of thing.
100%.
So I have different meetups during the week, and actually with Bernie as well, he's such a lovely guy, and I did interview him and worked with him at the incubator at Macquarie. So it's great to have friends like that. Absolutely.
It really is.
Yeah. All right. So building psychologically safe, and you use that word a lot, and resilient teams is a key focus for you. So for startup founders working to create a positive and supportive team culture, and notice I say team here because in your interview with the CEO of Bunnings, he doesn't say staff or employees, he says team, which I think is excellent. So what practical steps or strategies would you recommend to enhance both care and high performance within a startup team? So I guess first I really should have asked you, what is psychologically safe? What does that entail?
It was probably made famous by a Professor Amy Edmondson, who's at Harvard Business School. She wasn't the original inventor of the term, but she was the one that really showed its relevance about 15 years ago. For example, she worked on that disaster of the spaceship Challenger. She worked on that for 2 years to try and unpack what went wrong there. And so a psychologically safe team environment is where we feel we can be our authentic selves.
Yeah.
It's where we feel we can make suggestions and people won't, shut it down out of hand. They'll listen, they'll ask questions, they'll encourage it. It also encourages people to take moderate risks, to better serve a client or a colleague or whatever. Try things, moderate things.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, we don't crucify that effort. We actually, just say, well, that didn't work out. What did we learn and how do we move forward? And there was actually a seminal study published. It was in the New York Times. And if your listeners Google it, you Google NYT, what Google learned in its quest to build the perfect team. And there's quite a long article there about it. And the project was called Project Aristotle by Google. And they're seeking to understand what made it the best teams. They looked at 180 teams around the world. They looked at 250 different factors for each of those teams. And at first they thought it was going to be, the individual makeup. Were there more high performance people there? Were there more greater diversity? But they couldn't get, any real correlation there. And so the breakthrough came when they looked at how does a team work together? And they identified 5 key elements, or they call them team norms, that these very best teams used. And number 1 was psychological safety. And I'll come back to that in a moment. Number 2 was clarity and dependability. We knew what was expected. We knew about the various roadmap along the way. Number 3 was dependability, that if we say something, we will do that. We work it out. And if we can't, we'll come back and work out something together. Number 3 was around meaning, and that was really relating to the purpose of the organization. And number 5 was impact, that we felt our team was contributing to the purpose and meaning of the organization. And this term then was really looked at, and when I do presentations, I often use a tool called Menti. And so I ask people to reflect on their best team. It could have been this team, a previous team, a footy team, a netball team, when you worked at McDonald's. And I ask them, what was different about that team to other teams you've been in? And I give about 10 different options and ask them to choose 3. And always, in 95% of the cases, the top 3 are, we had each other's back, we cared about each other, and we enjoyed working together. And, that really describes psychological safety, having each other's back, caring about each other, and, enjoying ourselves, and that can make a huge, huge difference. So that's always a realization for people. They've already worked in one of those types of organizations or one of those teams. And then to keep it going, one of the things that Google found was the best way to build psychological safety is that every team meeting, every weekly team meeting, people had to share one risk they'd taken in the previous week. And we're not talking about physical risk, we're talking about psychological risk. So it could be, you got a troubled relationship with a customer. So you decide to go out and meet them in person. You take that risk to meet them, have a coffee and try and turn it around. Or a colleague where you could have had, some friction or whatever, you try and turn that around. And that's a really, really important component. The other thing is also to be pretty honest about how you're going from a mood perspective. And, just to ask people, you in a green zone or an amber zone this week sort of thing. It's very important that leaders are authentic with that and share what's really going on to make it okay for others to say what's happening with them as well.
I'm just thinking like typical Australian greeting is, how you going, mate? Yeah, good. You might be like terrible, but as everyone says, yeah, good. It's just that very
fantastic.
Really good. And then you're like, oh my God, I feel like hell. So having those zones, I think is really important.
And just on that, Paul, it does raise a very important point. Like on Saturday, I was interviewed on Sky News about International Men's Day 2023, which was on Sunday. And their theme this year was zero male suicides. And the background to that is that, and there's an amazing image you can probably Google online and see. But they did this incredible thing at Parliament House where they put a shoe for every one of the 2,500 men or boys who'd taken their life, and had it on the lawn with a name tied to the shoe or a photo on the shoe. An incredibly dramatic portrayal. And, men take their lives 3 times as much as women. And this I'm okay, I'm fine is toxic. It really it really doesn't do anyone a favor if you're trying to pretend. For one thing, and I've done this, I've done it the wrong way, where you pretend you're fine, but you like have a mask on,
Yes.
and it's exhausting having that mask on.
Oh, yeah.
And so, everyone needs to be able to say when they are slipping down the moodometer, and then get some thoughts or input about what could help you bounce back. Because as I said, it doesn't matter if you work really, really long hours. If you're not in the right headspace, you're not going to be incisive. You're not going to be productive. You're not going to be influential. And so managing our mood, not our time, is a really important element of anyone's success.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in our meetings when I had my startup, so every day and after it became once a week, but we just have a meeting where we just get together at the end on Friday, and then everybody had to say what they're grateful for. So to some it came easy, and I know you write about gratefulness and you practice that yourself with meditation every day, as do I as well. It's a really, really powerful tool, being gratitude and meditation as well. And some of the guys, they just every week is like, oh, what am I grateful for? They couldn't get the mindset, so you have to get the mindset of like, just think of yourself compared to somebody in a really poor country in Africa, or that you got running water. There's millions of things you can be grateful for, and once you get into that mindset, then it just changes your whole outlook and can really help with your mood and everything else. So I do that every single morning, before I even get out of bed, and it just changes my whole day.
That's wonderful, because it does. Humans have a negativity bias, and that comes from historical reasons. We had to be hyper alert, so a saber-toothed tiger didn't demolish us. And so what that means is that we are hyper alert to bad things or bad issues.
Yeah.
And, for most of us, if we have 5 great things happen a day, 1 bad thing, we tend to dwell on the bad thing.
Yes.
And the thing about writing down what you're grateful for is that it does start to change the brain.
Yeah.
And Martin Seligman, one of the pioneers of positive psychology, he found that if you wrote down 3 things you're grateful for at the end of the day, and no matter what day you'd had, if you had a shitty day, still find 3 things to be grateful for. It could be, having an amazing time with your dog, or it could be, finding a beautiful flower on a walk, or it could be having a lovely coffee. But just, actually think, well, what was good? What was things? And it can reset the brain and improve our mood.
Yeah, no, I absolutely believe it. It certainly does for me. That's really good advice. Okay, so Graeme, like, startups inherently face uncertainties, and we spoke a bit about that. It could be trying to secure funding, building a product, navigating the market changes. Based on your experiences, what mindset or approach should founders adopt to navigate and even thrive in the face of uncertainty?
I talk about acting like a VIP, and that's an acronym. It stands for vitality, intimacy, prosperity.
Yeah.
And so vitality is our physical health. It's, moving well, exercise, resting well, and eating well.
Mm-hmm.
And so each day, making time when you do get out, when you do something that is good for your physical health. And even a 20-minute brisk walk is better than nothing. It doesn't have to be a marathon. It doesn't have to be 2 hours in the gym, but just a brisk walk at lunchtime or whatever. The second thing is intimacy or emotional health.
Mm-hmm.
And the longest wellbeing study ever done is called the Harvard Grant Study. And it started in 1929 of Harvard graduates or sophomores. And at that time, they were just men. So it was just a men's thing. But they've followed those men every day, every year since then. And now most of that initial cohort has passed away.
Yeah.
But in all the analysis they did, they looked at thorough interviews each year, interviewing their family, interviewing their doctor, looking at their pathology results, looking at their autopsies, all these sorts of things. The one overwhelming finding from there is the best predictor of a long life, a happier life, a lower stress life, a more affluent life is having caring and supportive relationships around us. And that's why, that's the intimacy. That's spending time with people that are good with you,
Yeah.
and trying to have things in your week that make it routine, not something you have to organize all the time.
Mm.
And the third part is prosperity, and that's our contribution, health, or well-being. And that comes from, some people get it from their career, having a sense of purpose about their career. Some people get it through, volunteering for a charity
Yeah.
or a school or a sports team. But, doing something that contributes to a better world in some way. And by acting like a VIP, I really recommend that each day we top up something in the vitality, something in the intimacy, something in the prosperity. And I even have a self-care VIP snapshot.
Yeah.
And so every Sunday
Mhm.
I, work out how I'm going to have those things on. And it's like anything. If you schedule it on a Sunday and it's in your diary on a Sunday,
Yeah.
it's much, much likely that it's, going to happen.
Yeah.
As against sort of starting the week and then we get too busy and we don't fit those things in. It's those big rocks. If we don't put them in first, we can't fit them in when, the glass is already full.
And I think that can be downloaded from your website. Is that correct?
No, but if people want a copy, they could just contact me via LinkedIn. Very happy to email it out to people.
We'll put all the links to everything, in the description, so they'll have access to all of that. Okay. Yeah. No, that's it's really important to have that balance, Graeme. Yeah. So.
And the other part of that, and it's so that's the planning side of things, but I also have a self-care snapshot.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's 5 questions in each of the 3 categories to see how you're going. What's your emptiest glass of well-being? Is it vitality, intimacy, prosperity? And that gives clues on, what's your greatest priority to get yourself in better shape.
Mm. And focusing on something like when it comes to startups, if you're in a startup that is creating something like an impact startup that's creating something, and a lot of startups are there, the new technology or something that it's helping us to, live a better life or solve different problems, that's really helpful as well. But if you're just focused on making money, then for a start, you're much less likely to succeed. You're going to burn out very quickly, and to sustain it long term, you've got to find something you're really passionate about. Yeah. So in your book, Back from the Brink, you talk about how you worked in marketing and recruiting, and there's some aspects that you liked about it, but it wasn't really, your passion, and that's what you found after your depressive episode and writing the book and everything that you're doing now, We Care 365 and all the rest of it. And I had a similar experience. I was working for over 10 years in a job that, I didn't particularly like that much. I managed to actually move into some other areas just out of my own initiative, but then I was sort of put back, and I spent like 2 or 3 years really feeling terribly bored and no motivation whatsoever. It wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for the workplace, So I'm finding something that if you're, especially if you're still young, or even if you're not, but if you can, it's different when you have a mortgage and kids and everything else. If you haven't done this when you're young, it's harder, that stage where you're paying all your bills and you've got your kids. And that's what happened with me. I couldn't really move my, employment at that time. So stuck in a job for 10 years, particularly the last 2 years where I was really, bored and just felt terrible, to be honest. It's just terrible for your mental health. So if you can find something you're passionate about early, when you don't have to worry too much about bills or whatever, especially like being an entrepreneur, just get out and try it. That's what I think. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, very much so. And solve an important problem that you're passionate about. And that's
yes. Well, that's what
always,
startups are all about. Solving important problems.
They are.
All right. So, Graeme, as a successful professional who's worked in major corporations, how do you suggest startup founders balance their ambition for success with the need for personal well-being, especially considering the intense demands and long hours often associated with startup life? And just a note on that, I went to a a startup conference once, and these successful founders were saying to all these young guys, if you want to be successful, you got to work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I was completely horrified. And I think, how long are you going to sustain that for? You can completely burn out, you know? So there's a lot of bad advice out there. So what's some good advice, Graeme?
Well, it is about balance. It is about deciding each week what you want to do and want to achieve. And that was part of my path out of depression, was not trying to look too far ahead, but just think about what are the most important things for my physical health, my emotional health, but also the workplace. And when you're fresh, to really think about what is the most important thing I could do this week. A lot of people get into the mistake of trying to work on 5 things at once. And all the productivity research tell you it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And so when you think about the week ahead, I really encourage people to think, okay, what are the important and urgent things this week? And you might write down 4 and say, of all of those, what's the most important? And so you identify one. And then you say, I'm going to work for 3 hours uninterrupted on that one, and really make some progress. And you'll be astonished the progress you can make if you focus on one thing for 3 hours. You have a break in the middle, have breaks along the way, but you come back to that. And that's been, I've found to be really, really helpful is deciding what's the most important thing and then putting some dedicated time into it. And the more, if you knock over that one, the chances of you then knocking over number 2 later on the week is much, much higher. You're on a bit of a high. You've knocked over the most important. Now you're on to number 2. And so it creates its own momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. In Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks about that as well, and how, he has 4 quadrants, but basically you always start with the most important. And there's others in like the lowest quadrant that are just not really important. A lot of people, they procrastinate or they focus on that and they never really do anything. But if you get those big picture stuff, done, and then it really frees up a lot of other stuff as well. It's like not putting out fires.
I think
Sorry, Graeme.
I think one of his habits was first things first. What's the most important thing, and tackling that first. I must say, I remember first reading that book when it first came out, and it's got to be 35, 40 years ago, I guess. And I was impressed with then, but I've recently listened to it on an audiobook. It's an extended, unabridged audiobook, and it's actually read by Stephen Covey, even though he's passed away for a while now. It still really stacks up. And, in terms of getting a solid, balanced life together, it really stacks up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's still very, very relevant. And I read it about 20 years ago myself. It's totally relevant and something I've always remembered. There's a lot of other good points in that book. So I'll leave the links to that in the description as well. So, Graeme, is there any other advice or anything you'd like to give to startup founders that you think, particularly the early stage ones, and they're in that that stressful environment, that could help them? Because you've already given a lot of advice, but is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Don't be afraid to ask for help. And, I think there's very good ways you can do that. Figure out the right person you can ask, but also don't ask for too much. Ask for 1 or 2 things that could make a difference, 1 or 2 bits of advice, and then actually do it. There's nothing worse than someone coming to ask you advice, then coming back 3 weeks later to ask about the same thing. So when someone does share something that does make sense, make sure you put it into action. Make sure you thank them. Make sure you share with them, look, I did this and this is what happened. So there's no way we can know everything that's required to have a successful business this day. We'll always need help from others. And part of the obligation is also being prepared to share help with others if they seek you out for ideas or suggestions. So don't be afraid to ask for help.
Absolutely. And just going back to Stephen Covey again, in his book, he talks about emotional balance, like a bank balance. And then if you're consistent and you do what you say you're going to do, and you're always, helping people out, then you build up that emotional bank. And then when something happens, they're there for you. So that's a way of building up a genuine network as well.
It is.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, Graeme, I'm really, really grateful to have had you on the show today. And it's early days for me in the startup, so having a guest with your profile is wonderful, and loved all your advice and love the work that you're doing. You're really making a difference, which is so important.
Thanks, Paul. And it's a really important thing that you're doing as well. The startup world can be exciting. It can be, incredibly motivating, but it also can be very draining. And, it is that balance of, focusing on your own mood and also the outcomes. Both those things are essential for sustainable success.
Absolutely. And very wise words to end the podcast. Thanks so much for being on today, Graeme.
No worries. Thanks a lot, Paul. Really appreciate it.